In our world, there are ordinary rivers that we see. This is actually just normal. There are flowing waters, some rush by, and they quietly pass through the forests and mountains. But unknown to you, in different parts of the world, there are rivers so strange that they can kill a person in just a few seconds. Yes, you heard that right. And in fact, there are also rivers in the world that have two different colors, but the waters don't mix right away. There is also a river so red, it looks like blood. And there are even rivers that are so hot, they can instantly scald anything that falls into them in just a few seconds. The river flows wider than a 2-lane road.
There are some that are so intense, it's like their color stands out. There is also a river, hot, for 6.24, red as blood.
These are real places that scientists are still studying today because of the unusual behavior of their water. And one of the earliest examples of this can be found in the middle of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. Here you will see what is called the meeting of the waters. But before we start the discussion, I would like to ask you for a like and please subscribe to our channel. This is a huge help for us content creators, so let's get started. This is one of the most famous natural phenomena in South America. When viewed from above, it looks like two giant rivers flowing side by side without mixing right away. On one side, you can see the dark waters of the Rio Negro. On the other side is the light brown, coffee-colored water of the Rio Solimões, which is part of the Amazon River system. What's surprising is that even though they flow side by side, the line between them remains clear for several kilometers. It's like there's an invisible wall in the middle of the water. In a normal situation, when two rivers meet, their waters quickly mix together. But here, that doesn't happen right away. And the reason isn't magic, but science. According to researchers and NASA's satellite observations, these two rivers have very different characteristics. The Rio Negro is warmer, its current is slower, and its water is more acidic. Its dark color comes from decaying leaves and plants. From the rainforest, the water looks like the color of tea or coffee. But even though it's dark, surprisingly, it's actually, clearer than other rivers because it contains very little mud and sediment. Meanwhile, the Rio Solimões comes from the Andes Mountains. As it flows down from the mountains, a lot of mud, rocks, and sediment mix with the water, which is why it turns light brown in color. Its water is also colder and flows faster. Because they have different temperatures, flow speeds, and densities, and because of the different chemical compositions of the two rivers, they don't mix right away when they meet. They're like oil and water that are forced together but just won't combine immediately. This phenomenon is so massive that it can even be seen from space. And as they continue to flow, that's when the water slowly starts to mix because of the wind, waves, and the swirling currents in the river. But before that happens, you'll first see one of the most unique views on the entire planet. And Brazil isn't the only place with this kind of phenomenon. In Switzerland, there's another river that looks like it's split into two different colors. Here, the Rhone River and the Arbe River meet near Geneva. The Rhone is turquoise blue because of the clear water from the Alps. Meanwhile, the Arbe River is muddy and ash-colored because it carries a lot of sediment from the glacier and mountains. When the two mix, the difference in their colors is so clear that it looks like an edited photo. But this is absolutely real. And just like in Brazil, science is also the reason why they don't mix right away. The speed, density, and contents of the water are different. In other words, even though they're both rivers, it's like two different worlds temporarily flowing together. And while there are rivers that are unique because of their color, there are also rivers in the world that are even more shocking because of how dangerous they are. In the middle of Colombia, there's a river that suddenly turns red, yellow, green, orange, pink, and sometimes even violet, depending on the time of year. There's no paint in the water, no chemicals, and it's definitely not an optical illusion. This place is called Caño Cristales. It's also known as the Rainbow River or the River of Five Colors. You can find it in Sierra de la Macarena National Park, a remote part of Colombia, where mountains, grasslands, and rainforest meet. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary clear river, But when the right season comes, the entire appearance of the water suddenly changes. It's like a rainbow exploded beneath the water. And what's most interesting here is that it's not actually the water that's colored. The real reason is a unique plant that grows under the river. This plant is called Macarena clavigera, a special aquatic plant that can almost only be found in that place. Usually it just looks like an ordinary green plant. But when the water level is just right, there's enough sunlight, and the timing is perfect after the rainy season, it starts to change color. The entire riverbed turns bright red, pink, orange, yellow, and green. Because the river water is clear, you can clearly see the colorful plants underneath from above. That's why the whole river itself looks colorful. According to reports from BBC and National Geographic, the change in color is connected to the combination of sunlight, water level, temperature, and the condition of the plants. When the water is too high, not enough light reaches the plants. On the other hand, when it's too dry, they also can't survive properly. That's why the brightest colors only appear for a few months each year. And every year, the river looks different. There are times when red is more dominant. In other seasons, the green or yellow tones come out more. This means it's almost impossible to see it look exactly the same twice. But it's not just the plants that make this place special. The very rocks at the bottom of the river are also very old. According to geological studies, this is part of the Guiana Shield, one of the oldest rock formations on Earth, estimated to be over 1 billion years old. Over a very long period of time, different minerals have accumulated here from the ancient flow of water and sediment. And because of the combination of clear water, mineral-rich rocks, and the right climate, it became the perfect environment for the Macarena clavigera to thrive. In other words, so many things need to come together to form this unique river. And another surprising thing is that for a long time, this place was almost unknown to the world. For much of the 20th century, the region was dangerous because of armed conflict in Colombia. There were rebel groups, drug traffickers, and military operations in the area, so the place was closed off to many tourists before. Because of this, only a few people were able to see this river before. But as the place gradually became safer in the early 2000s, more and more tourists and researchers started visiting here. And when its photos spread on the internet, it quickly became one of the most unique natural wonders in South America. But while this river seems like it was made by nature to amaze people, the next river we'll talk about is the opposite. Because just by looking at its color, it's clear that something is wrong with it. If there's a river that looks like a rainbow because of its colorful plants, there's also a river in Europe that seems like it was taken directly from another planet. In the southern part of western Spain, there's a river that's red and orange, as if rust or blood is flowing through it. When you see it at first glance, you'll think the water is extremely polluted, or maybe a chemical spill happened. But what's surprising is that this river has looked like this for a long time. This is called Rio de Na, which in Spanish means stained river or colored river. As it flows from the mountains of Andalusia, the surroundings look normal at first. But when it reaches some parts near the town of Niebla, the color of the water suddenly changes. It turns bright red, dark orange, and sometimes almost rust-colored. And the reason for this is a combination of geology, metal, and bacteria. Thousands of years ago, volcanic activity was said to be active in this region. Because of that, a lot of sulfide minerals and metal deposits were left underground. Over time, these metals gradually mix with water and oxygen. This is where the river's extreme acidity began. Because the water is so acidic, most ordinary plants and animals cannot survive here. According to scientific studies and NASA reports, the pH level in some parts of the Rio Tinto sometimes reaches around 2. That's almost the same acidity as vinegar or lemon juice. But even though the environment is extremely harsh, there are still microorganisms and bacteria that live here. And this is where the river becomes even more unique. Some bacteria in the Rio Tinto feed on sulfur and metal compounds to survive. While they do that, they further affect the chemistry of the water. They also produce ferric iron, a substance similar to rust. And that's the main reason why the river is red. In other words, its color isn't caused by paint. Rust and microscopic organisms are what make all the water red. The condition of the river has reportedly worsened because of mining in this area for a very long time. According to archaeologists, there has been mining of copper and other minerals in the region for more than several thousand years. Since the Copper Age and Bronze Age, people have been using this place to extract metal from underground. And as more land is excavated, more sulfide minerals are exposed to water and air. That's why the acidity of the river keeps increasing. But aside from its unusual appearance, there's another reason why scientists are interested in this. Because according to some astrobiologists and studies, the chemistry of the Rio Tinto is said to be similar to some parts of the surface of Mars. Researchers are particularly interested in a mineral called jarosite, an iron-rich mineral found both in the Rio Tinto and on Mars. Because of this, scientists sometimes use the place as a testing ground to study what kind of life could survive in the extreme environments of other planets. In other words, this river in Spain also helps in studying whether life was once possible on Mars, even if it's just microorganisms. But no matter how unusual the color of this red river is, there is an even scarier color of water in the next place. Because in our next location, it's not just the river that's blood red. It's the glacier itself that seems to be bleeding out of the ice. In the middle of Antarctica's white surroundings, there's a waterfall that looks like a scene from a horror movie. From a distance, it looks like a wound that has opened in the ice. Thick red liquid continuously flows out of the Taylor Glacier, and it's called blood falls. When the explorer Thomas Griffith Taylor first saw this in 1911, many thought that algae might be the reason for its red color. But as decades passed, scientists still weren't really sure where the red water was coming from. And it's even more puzzling because this is in Antarctica, one of the coldest places on Earth. So the question many people have is, how can there be flowing water in a place that's almost entirely ice? Eventually, researchers used more advanced imaging technology to look beneath the glacier, and that's where they discovered the real secret. Underneath the thick ice, there's actually a hidden lake and a network of subglacial rivers. This means there are rivers flowing right beneath the glacier, but they're not filled with ordinary water. It's an extremely salty brine with a high iron content. As the water gets trapped under the intense pressure of the glacier, the liquid is forced to rise up through tiny cracks in the ice. And when it comes out and mixes with the oxygen in the air, the iron in the water starts to react, just like how iron rusts. That's where the bright red color of blood falls comes from. And there's another reason why its water doesn't freeze right away. Because the brine is extremely salty, its freezing point is lower compared to ordinary water. To put it simply, it's harder for it to turn into ice even if the surroundings are extremely cold. That's why, even in Antarctica, the water continues to flow from the glacier. According to researchers from Oregon State University, this is one of the most unique examples of flowing liquid water in an extremely cold place on Earth. And as scientists study blood falls more closely, they gain a deeper understanding of how water and microorganisms can survive even in the most extreme environments on the planet. In most rivers around the world, you can swim, fish, or collect water. But in the middle of the Amazon rainforest in Peru, there's a river that can kill you in just a few seconds. Not because of sharks, not even because of crocodiles, but because its water is literally boiling. At first glance, it just looks like an ordinary part of the rainforest. Thick jungle, noisy birds, and dense smoke rising from between the trees. But as you get closer, you'll notice that the heat in the air isn't normal. And when you reach the river itself, that's when you'll understand why it has long been considered a legend by the locals. This is called Chanay Timpishca, or more commonly known as the Boiling River. For many years, it was just a story for most people in Peru. Some say there's a river in the jungle that can boil an animal alive if it falls into the water. Others believe there's a supernatural reason or a curse behind it. But for the young Andres Russo back then, this legend became his obsession. As he grew up, he wanted to find out if the boiling river really existed. And by 2011, he became a geoscientist and started searching for this place using scientific research and thermal mapping. Getting there wasn't easy. According to his documentation in National Geographic, they had to travel for several hours from the city of Pucallpa, ride a motorized canoe on the river, and walk for a long time through the thick rainforest before they reached the place. And when he saw it, he proved that the story wasn't just made up. In the middle of the rainforest, there really is a river that's extremely hot. The average temperature of the water in some parts reportedly reaches around 85 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to cause severe burns to people. There are also animals that are said to die instantly when they fall into the extremely hot water. And what's even more surprising is that there are no active volcanoes nearby. Usually, extremely hot water is connected to geothermal activity near volcanic areas. But the boiling river is hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest active volcano. So for a long time, it was a mystery to scientists where its heat was coming from. Eventually, researchers studied the underground area around the river more closely, and that's where they discovered the real reason. According to geological studies, there are deep cracks and fault lines beneath this area. Rainwater and groundwater slowly seep down beneath the earth. As it goes deeper, it gets hotter because of the natural heat from inside the planet. Afterwards, the extremely hot water is forced to rise back to the surface through the cracks in the ground. And because this process continues, an extremely hot river is formed right in the middle of the Amazon jungle. To put it simply, it's like a giant natural kettle is at work underground. According to Andres Russo, this may be one of the world's largest thermal rivers not directly linked to an active volcano. But aside from its heat, this river is also important to the culture of the indigenous communities in the area. For many generations, they have considered this a sacred place that is part of their spiritual traditions. So for them, this is not just an unusual river. It is a place that should be respected. And while there is a river that can boil water, there is another river in Asia that does something almost impossible to imagine. Because in Cambodia, there is a river that doesn't just flow, it changes direction twice every year. In a normal situation, a river only flows in one direction, from the mountains to the sea. But the Tonle Sap River in Cambodia is different. For half the year, it flows in one direction. Then, it suddenly reverses. Yes, the flow of water literally reverses. You can find it near the capital of Cambodia, Phnom Penh, where the Tonle Sap River meets the massive Mekong River. This river is vital to the lives of millions of people. It provides a large portion of the fish and livelihood in the region. But what makes it truly unique is the unusual behavior of its water during the rainy and dry seasons. When the monsoon season starts in Southeast Asia, from around May to October, the volume of water in the Mekong River increases greatly because of the heavy rains. Because of the strong current of the Mekong, it forces the flow of the Tonle Sap River to reverse. Instead of flowing out, the water flows back toward Tonle Sap Lake. Because of this, the lake becomes much larger. According to reports and environmental studies, the size of the lake can increase several times during the wet season. But when the dry season comes and the Mekong River weakens, the flow of the Tonle Sap returns to normal. It flows away from the lake again. In other words, it's like the entire water system in Cambodia is breathing. It gets bigger and bigger during the rainy season. Then it gradually shrinks during the dry season. And because of this unique cycle, the Tonle Sap has become one of the most important freshwater ecosystems in all of Southeast Asia. Of all the rivers we've seen, this is probably the most unique. Not because of its color, not because of its temperature either, but because of how unusual it is. In the country of New Zealand, there is a river that has been officially recognized as a person under the law. Yes, literally. This river has legal rights, just like a human being or a company.
This is the Wanganui River. It's the third longest one in New Zealand, and as of Wednesday, it's a legal person.
This is called the Wanganui River. It's one of the longest rivers in the North Island of New Zealand. It flows from the mountains all the way to the Tasman Sea, and it has long been an important part of the lives of the local Maori communities. But for the Maori people, the Wanganui is not just an ordinary river. For them, it is a living part of their culture and ancestry. For a very long time, they have believed that their identity is connected to the river itself. They see it as family, and because of that, they fought for a long time for the river to be recognized and protected, not just as a natural resource, but as a living entity. In 2017, the government of New Zealand passed the Te Awa Tupua Act. Under this law, the Wanganui River was officially granted legal personhood. Simply put, the law recognized that the river has its own legal identity. This means it can be represented in court, and there are people who will legally defend the interests of the river. This doesn't mean that the river is literally a person, but the concept is that the law is saying the river should be treated as having its own rights and protection. According to some legal experts and environmental scholars, this was done to better protect nature against pollution, overuse, and environmental destruction. Because if the river has legal rights, it's easier to challenge or take legal action against activities that harm it. And New Zealand isn't the only one to take this kind of step. Several countries also tried to give legal protection to rivers and natural areas after the Wanganui River case became famous. But even though the idea sounds good, the situation also became complicated. Because what if there are existing projects that already use water from the river? One of the issues here is hydropower and water use in New Zealand. Some of the river's water are used for electricity generation. And even though the river now has legal personhood, there are still existing permits and laws that continue to apply. That's why there has been tension between environmental protection, indigenous beliefs, and practical needs like energy and business. In other words, not all problems automatically disappear just because of a new law. But for many environmental groups, this is still an important symbol because it shows that it's possible to see nature not just as something for people to use, but also as something that should be protected and respected. And while there is a river that has been recognized as a legal person, there is another river in Antarctica whose existence is almost impossible to believe. Because it's not just hidden under the ice, it's also one of the longest underground rivers discovered by scientists on the frozen continent. In recent years, a massive subglacial river system was discovered beneath Antarctica. This means there are rivers flowing right beneath the thick ice sheet. And what's even more surprising is that one of the discovered rivers stretches for hundreds of kilometers. It's said to be even longer than the Thames River in the United Kingdom. This can't be seen on the surface. There are no signs that there's a river beneath the ice. But using computer models, satellite data, and radar technology, scientists are gradually discovering the network of water moving beneath Antarctica. According to researchers from Imperial College London, these rivers are important for the movement of ice on the surface. To put it simply, the water beneath the ice sheet acts like a lubricant. When the water pressure is high, the massive mass of ice on top of it slides and moves faster. And when this water flows out into the ocean, it can also speed up the melting of ice shelves from below. That's why this is a big deal in studying climate change and sea level rise. Because even a small change in underground water flow in Antarctica could affect the stability of the massive ice sheets. And if the ice melts faster, sea levels could also rise in different parts of the world. That's why for scientists, these hidden rivers are not just simple discoveries. They are also an important key to understanding how our planet will change in the coming decades, and maybe that's the most interesting thing about Earth's rivers. We thought it was just simple water flowing from the mountains to the sea, but behind every river there are stories of geology, climate, biology, culture, and sometimes even mysteries that science still doesn't fully understand. There's a river that's like a rainbow. There's a river that's blood-colored. There's a river that boils. There's a river where the current reverses. And there are also rivers hidden beneath kilometers of ice. This just shows that no matter how much we already know about Earth, there are still so many parts of the planet that can surprise us.